Has Christ satisfied the wrath of God? Part 1. Hypergrace teaches, as well as most mainstream churches, teaches that Christ's death satisfied God's wrath directed at mankind. This teaching is primarily based on a particular interpretation of the prophetic passage in Isaiah chapter 53. In part 2, we will take a closer look at this chapter to determine whether it truly supports the idea that Christ came to receive and satisfy God's wrath. However, when we study the New Testament, we encounter a significant issue as we find clear statements that God's wrath is still to come upon mankind. For example, in Colossians chapter 3 verse 6, we read that because of these things the wrath of God is coming on the children of disobedience. In Romans chapter 2 verse 5 to verse 6, Paul writes that because of your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath when God's righteous judgment is revealed. He will repay each person according to their deeds. This raises a theological question. If God's wrath was fully poured out on Christ, then why is it still necessary for God to pour out his wrath on mankind? If Christ's death truly satisfied God's wrath, wouldn't that mean that there is no wrath left to be poured out? In 1 John chapter 2 verse 2, John writes that Christ is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. If this means that Christ satisfied God's wrath for the entire world, then logically there should be no reason for any further wrath. And yet, Jesus says in John chapter 3 verse 36 that God's wrath still abides on those who reject him. In reality, Christ's death was the substitution or the atonement for mankind's sin because, as Romans chapter 6 verse 23 tells us, the wages of sin is death. Jesus did not come to save us from God's wrath. He came to save us from the power and penalty of sin. God's wrath is not what we needed saving from, our own sin is. As Psalm 145 verse 8 declares, "The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger and great in mercy." God's wrath is reserved for those who persist in rebellion and continue to reject Christ's sacrifice. Like and subscribe for more 2-minute biblical rebuttals.